Hi, welcome back to Storytime with Brooks. Today's episode we are going to be reading Chapter 2. So, we are in my handy dandy recording studio. This is where I record the audiobook, and without further ado, we will get to reading. Chapter 2. The Shadows Stole My Sister. Evadne, 3 months later. I will not sleep. I cannot sleep. I cannot hear those screams again. Unknown. Shooting stars flew across the vast expanse of the sky, and I was happily freezing my fingers stiff as I watched them fall, tracing the patterns of the remaining constellations in my sketchbook by the light of the full moon. If I could live forever beneath the stars, it still wouldn't be long enough for me. I flexed my fingers, trying to bring some feeling back into the numb joints. We were only a few days into December, but already a deep cold had settled into the air, bringing with it the warning of a long, hard winter. Evadne, Faye called from the back door. It's freezing out here. You should come in. Mom and Dad already went to bed, and they told me not to let you stay out too long. She paused, and I could almost hear her chewing her lip in thought. Although, I think I have already. It's after 1. Her clock must be wrong. It can't possibly be that late. 5 more minutes, I pleaded, my eyes still glued to the heavens. Evadne. I glanced at her, and she shook her head ruefully, a smile overtaking her features. I have hot rooibos tea and fresh oatmeal cookies waiting. You don't want to let them get cold. My stomach growled appreciatively, and I glared down at it. Traitor, I whispered indignantly. Faye smirked. She had me hooked, and she knew it. I could never resist the lure of her fresh-baked oatmeal cookies. I'll be right in, I relented. I just want to finish sketching the myth that goes with this constellation. Faye came up behind me and glanced down at the charcoal drawing on my sketchbook. That's very good, Eva, she remarked, but Ember will have all the cookies eaten if you don't hurry up. I don't think I can stop her from devouring them. You know she's an absolute terror when it comes to baked goods. More like Cookie Monster. She better not, I muttered as I turned back to my drawing. She knows the rules. And as far as I was concerned, Ember could have all but 2 of the cookies. I had eternal and forever dibs to 2 cookies from every batch Faye made. It's not like it really mattered. Faye would make more, but it was the principle of the thing. Dibs were dibs. Faye had recently started baking at odd hours of the night, and much to Ember's joy, our cookie supply was consequently overflowing. Baking was her newest form of stress relief, that and knitting. She said it was just insomnia, but I knew by the way she woke up screaming that it was the nightmares. She had reached the point where she was doing anything to keep herself awake. Faye wiped a smudge of charcoal onto her finger and promptly put a streak on my nose. Don't be too long, she said gently as she kissed the top of my head. I won't, I replied absent-mindedly. My stomach gave another growl, threatening mutiny. I could imagine it whining that if it didn't have a cookie this instant, it was going to shrivel up and die. 2 cookies, I whispered into the darkness, and then I'll be back. Stupid stomach, I muttered to myself as I began a half-hearted attempt to go back inside. My eyes were still glued to the constellations overhead, demanding crunchings and munchings at this hour of the night when I am clearly stargazing. I grumbled as I walked backward. I must be a hobbit if I am putting my stomach before my ardent love of the stars. An unexpected wave of grief rose up within me, and suddenly the world went blurry as tears swam in my eyes. Without thinking, I had uttered the phrase that Jack had favored. I could almost hear his voice in my mind as he quoted a favorite line from Lloyd Alexander's books, a line that he had altered with his own name. Gave poor starving Jackweiss munchings and crunchings, he used to whine when trying to sneak food off our plates. Oh, Jack, I whispered into the darkness. Where are you? I knew it was impossible, foolish even, but I couldn't help but hope that somewhere, somehow, he could hear the sound of my voice as I whispered my pleas to the stars and would come back home to us. The wind picked up around me and a shiver ran down my spine, bringing with it a sense of wrongness, as if the darkness itself was now watching me. My lingering hesitation to go inside vanished, and I dashed up the stairs, running across the porch and through the back door. It closed loudly behind me, and I stood heaving against it. I am imagining things. My stomach is playing tricks on my mind, sending false signals to my brain to get me inside to the cookies faster. There's nothing out there but normal darkness and stars. Beautiful, amazing falling stars. A sliver of light protruded from the kitchen doorway, and I could hear Faye's voice as I kicked off my insulated boots. She was singing that lullaby again. No doubt to Ember. For reasons I could not understand, Ember loved the heartache within the lyrics. After she'd heard Faye singing it the first time, she couldn't get enough of it, and was always asking Faye to sing it for her. I stopped outside the kitchen door and listened for a moment, enamored as always to Faye's beautiful alto range. I stopped outside of the kitchen door and listened for a moment, enamored as always by Faye's beautiful alto range. The ringdove sang from the willow spray, Faye sang softly. Well a day, he mourned for the fate of his darling mate. Well a day. The song drifted into an unfamiliar language. For some unexplainable reason, I was filled with sorrow and longing. Till the prisoner is fast, she resumed in English once more, and her doom is cast. There stay, oh stay, when the charm is around her, and the spell has bound her. Hie away, away. A deafening explosion rocked the house, and her song morphed into a cry of fear. All the windows around me exploded inward, and I screamed as shards of glass flew in every direction. Sharp slivers sliced my skin, and I stumbled back, terrified. I slipped, glass crunching under my bare feet as I struggled not to fall. There was debris everywhere, and I stared in dazed confusion at the blood that welled up on my arms. What's happening? Was there a gas explosion? I was distantly aware of a pain in my feet, the horrifying sensation of shards embedded deep within the skin. I have to get to Faye and Ember. I have to make sure they're okay. Before I could get my bearings, there was another explosion. I watched in numb horror as the front door blew off its hinges and was thrown against the wall. Ember! Faye! I screamed, snapping out of my daze as I tried to push into the kitchen. Something was pulling me back, away from them. Arms. There were arms around me, and step by step they were taking me away from my sisters. No! I shrieked as I kicked and flailed. Be still, a male voice whispered urgently. I most certainly will not. Something was forming in the doorway, and to my surprise the man suddenly changed directions and rushed forward instead of back, cursing vehemently in French as he dragged me through the kitchen doors and into the pantry. He held me tightly against his chest, and no matter how I struggled and kicked, I couldn't get out of his grasp. Ember would know how to get out of something like this. She's the martial arts expert. Help! Someone please help me! Help us! Why did the windows explode? What's happening? The stained glass on the pantry doors was shattered, and through the hole I could see everything going on in the kitchen. Hold still, the guy's voice whispered urgently. If you don't, you'll get us both killed. He smelled strange, like the outdoors when spring approaches, with hints of wood smoke and traces of strong coffee. Footsteps pounded on the floor above us, no doubt Dad and Mum rushing to investigate the explosion and find us. They knew we were all still up to see the meteor shower. A sense of terror was overtaking me, and I fell still, watching as Faye shoved Ember into the empty lower cabinet. She and I had cleaned it out earlier today to practice a prank we were planning to pull on Dad tomorrow. This is not good. This is really, really bad. Everything had changed in a matter of moments, but it felt like hours, and I watched as Ember's fiery red hair disappeared into the cabinet as if in slow motion. She uttered a protesting shout, and Faye slammed the door shut. Stay there! Faye cried. Her blue-gray eyes were wide with horror as she turned to face the threat at hand. Her clothing was ruined, and blood was rapidly spreading through the fabric. Her long blonde hair was pulled back into a French braid, and her slim form looked minuscule in the wreckage that our house had suddenly become. She's hurt. What are we going to do? Oh no, the cookies are all over the floor. They're ruined. There's probably glass in them now. 2 of those were mine. There are more important things than cookies. My stomach still insisted on uttering a growl of disappointment, and I could swear the man holding me gave a muffled snort of amusement. What is wrong with me? We are under attack, and I'm worried about cookies? Shadows were pouring into the room, creating a midnight black cloud where the dining room used to be. Faye's hand trembled as she grabbed a knife from the knife block, her face ashen as she stared at the darkness that had gathered. Mom and Dad rushed into the room at the same moment that another stranger burst through the side door that led out to the garden. What is this? Everyone is going to barge into our house night? Run! The new stranger cried. They found you! He was wearing a long black cloak and high black boots tucked into black leather pants. A long sword hung at his waist, and strands of his chin-length blonde hair were falling loose from where the rest had been tied back. His appearance was out of place, as if he had been transported from the Lord of the Rings. Get out of here, he panted, pulling urgently at Dad's hand. Dad stared at the destruction around him in shock, mouth agape and eyes wide. Pieces of glass littered the floor from every window being blown in. Flour and batter streaked the countertops, and the remains of 24 cookies were scattered across the floor. The room was steadily growing colder as freezing December air rapidly filled the house. Get the girls and go, the stranger yelled, jerking Dad's hand. Rustlin! Mom cried. The girls! He snapped out of his shock and reached for Faye. She pulled away from him and shouted Ember's name. The cabinet door was starting to open, but it was already too late. Figures were beginning to take shape within the black shadows. The strange man's grip tightened around me, his breath a ragged pant above my head. Faye lunged, and her foot connected with the cabinet. The door slammed shut, and a cry of outrage slipped from the cupboard. Faye desperately hissed at Ember to be quiet. She jerked back, away from the cabinet, away from Ember, as someone began to emerge. A strange-looking man was the first to walk from the darkness. He strolled into our house as if he owned it and coldly surveyed the scene in front of him. Faye was pressed against the kitchen table, her hands trembling slightly as she met his icy stare and brandished the knife. Da and Mom were frozen in terror, still reaching for Faye. The blonde stranger was the only one who seemed unafraid, standing unfazed beside them. The shadow man's face was unusually pale, his skin a deathly white beneath an uneven splatter of freckles. His dark red hair was pulled back into a long braid, and a bone-white crown sat atop his head. He was tall and gaunt, with hollows in his cheekbones and long, slender fingers that reminded me of bones. My eyes latched onto the wings that rose behind him, black and scaled like a dragon's wings from cartoons. I must be dreaming. This must be a nightmare. This isn't real, and my cookies are safe. It's just a dream. It's nothing but a dream. People don't have wings. Strangers don't invade our house. Nothing ever happens. This is Kansas. He stood silent for a moment, eyes narrowing as his gaze flicked around the room. So, this is how you repay me, he said at last. I give you your life, and you hide the air behind your back. His voice was thin, and it felt as if it was slicing through me with every word he spoke. The blonde stranger took a brave step forward, his silver eyes hard as flint. You have no right to come here, he spat. He has no magic, and the realm has no claim. The blood belongs to me, the pale one seethed. I blinked, and suddenly he was in front of the blonde stranger. Blood splattered across the floor, and the stranger fell, a deep gash running from his temple to his neck. The pale man turned his black eyes on my parents, fingertips dark with blood, and Das snapped into action. He lunged forward, shoving Faye back as he placed himself between her and the pale man. Run! He shouted back toward Mom and Faye. Faye's terrified glance went to the cabinet, and I knew she wouldn't leave when Ember was still trapped inside. Shadows were blocking the exit behind Faye and Mom as more figures emerged from the darkness. A guy with blonde hair and bright green eyes, who looked to be somewhere in his 20s, now stood just behind the pale man. He seemed to be the only normal one of the bunch, all except for his pointed ears. He was dressed in strange clothing, with a woven circlet on top of his head that resembled a crown, and was arrayed in a varying range of lethal-looking weapons. His luminescent eyes flicked to the cabinet, and I knew by the uneven set to the door that Ember was peeking out, watching the scene unfold. Please don't notice her. Please don't notice her. He scrutinized the cabinet for a moment, but if he saw her there, he said nothing. Seconds passed, and I held my breath, a pit of dread forming in my stomach. Stay still, Ember. Please, stay still. After another moment, his gaze began to drift lazily around the room. The pale man was eyeing Da in annoyance. "Step aside, Grimm," he commanded. "Do not be so foolish as to stand between me and the girl." "I will not let you harm my family," Dad snarled, raising a handgun toward the man. "Leave now, or you will not live to regret your decision." He eyed the gun calmly. "Foolish Grimm," he laughed as he took a step toward Faye. "You will learn that I do as I please." "Leave!" Dad roared. The pale man silently stared him down, unafraid and unmoving. The gun went off, the noise deafening in the small space as Dad emptied the clip. The bullets passed through the pale man and embedded themselves into the wall behind him. The gun trembled in Dad's hand and he stared in disbelief. But before he could decide what to do, he was blown backward. He hit the wall by the kitchen doorway and the shadows rushed forward, pinning him in place. Mum was beside him in an instant. I watched horrified as the shadows yanked her leg sideways, forcing it into an unnatural angle with a sickening crunch. A scream barely escaped her lips before black pieces of cloth appeared out of nowhere, wrapping themselves around both of their mouths and rendering them incapable of any sound. A small noise caught in my throat and a hand clapped over my mouth. A soft hiss escaped the man holding me. "Please," he breathed, "stay silent." The pale man regarded Faye coldly as he tilted his head to the side. "Hello, daughter of Grimm," he said quietly. "I have been searching for you." "Stay away!" Faye snarled vehemently as she raised the knife. "How dare you come into our home and hurt my family like this?" I didn't even see him move as he knocked the knife from her hand. His other hand was a blur as he slapped her hard across the cheek. She fell, hitting the floor with a cry before crawling to her knees. She straightened, but was unable to move past that point. Some unseen force was holding her in place. She strained against it, determination and fury written across her face. Power seemed to radiate from the pale man as he surveyed the scene around him, a cold smile growing on his face. "So, he thought he could hide you from us," he tisked. "Foolish Grimm. He of all people should have known." He turned his gaze on Da. "You have a duty to fulfill, but no powers to do it. A strange mutation. That will be remedied." He approached him, placing a single finger on his chest. "Once it is, you will guard the gate from the mortal side. Consider it a gift that I let you stay with your family. I require a payment each solstice." Da's face contorted in pain as he writhed under the man's touch. "Don't worry," the pale man said distantly. "The pain will stop in time." Another dreadful moment passed and he turned back toward Faye. "But you, oh magnificent creature that you are, you will be most useful." He paused, stroking the same finger down the side of her face. "Once you are trained, and I claim you, that is." Faye flinched and jerked, breaking through whatever hold he had on her for just an instant. He chuckled. "Yes, you are powerful indeed. The magic that crackles through you belongs to summer. The solstice may be on the new moon, but I will not have winter stealing another one from me." Faye continued to struggle, trying to push against the invisible bonds as a look of rage flashed across her face. "I belong to no one," Faye spat. "I am not something to be claimed." His features went stone cold. "Such a temper," he whispered, giving a mock sigh. "But all must learn at some point in their lives." He tilted her chin upward, forcing her to look at him. She glared, looking as if she was trying to spit on him. He returned her glare with a gaze of uncaring control. "Lest you forget that I own you and the inheritance that courses through that miserable body of yours." His fingers tightened around her face. "You would do well to learn from this lesson, or you will face worse pain within the realm." A curl of smoke rose from Faye's shoulder, and her face contorted in pain before she bit her lip, as if resolving not to make a sound. "You owe me your very life," he sneered softly. "The stolen magic that flows through your veins is the only thing that brought you into this world." Blood dripped from the corner of her mouth. She had bitten through her lip in an effort not to scream. As he released her chin, she fell forward, panting on her hands and knees while the left shoulder of her shirt slowly burned away. I shuddered as a scream at last erupted from her, and tears streamed down her face, dripping onto the floor with strands of snot. She was not allowed the dignity to wipe them as she remained frozen in place. By now, the back of her shirt was only held intact by a few slender strands of material. The rest had melted away, revealing angry, blood-red skin and a blackened, ruin-like mark that had been burned into her left shoulder blade. I had to get to her. I had to help her. I began to struggle against the hands that held me, trying to break free of the iron grip that stopped any movement. "Let me go! Let me go!" "I'm sorry," the man whispered. "My orders were to make sure you didn't go in." "Whose orders? I have to get in there. I have to help her." I wrenched my head to the right, biting down as hard as I could on the knuckles of the man's pointer finger. If I could distract him, I could break away and get to Faye. He cursed softly, once again in French, but his hold remained the same, and his hand still silenced any noise I could possibly try to make. I was shaking, watching in horror as the shadows began to writhe around the unconscious body of the silver-eyed man. He was very slowly disappearing from the room. This can't be real. This is a nightmare. This is nothing but a nightmare. People don't just disappear. "I'll be back for the other two when the sickness consumes them," the pale man said in a dismissive tone, his quiet voice filling the kitchen. Fear rippled through me, and I stopped struggling. He's going to come back for us. He's going to come back. Shadows wrapped around Faye, pulling her backward. Da and Mum watched helplessly, still pinned against the wall. The pale man stopped in the doorway, turning his black eyes upon my parents. "If you make any attempt to spirit the other two away, we'll kill her," he said mildly, "and we'll take the other two regardless. I can promise that if you choose to do that, they will bear the punishment for your rebellion. They will wish for death long before such a merciful end is ever granted." I was trembling, no longer trying to fight, no longer attempting to resist. Oh no, oh no, oh no, what are we going to do? Faye was screaming now, her voice raw and terrified. "Help me, please! Stop him! Mom! Dad! Please, help!" The shadows slowly faded away, and soon Faye was out of sight. Da and Mum fell to the floor, staring in horror and disbelief at where the shadows had been. The world around me went dark, and I didn't register that I had collapsed. All I knew was that Faye was gone, and we hadn't been able to save her. Tune in next week for the next chapter of Kidnapping Grimm. Have a wonderful week, and I'll see you next time. Bye.